Okay, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn Lunchtime Archaeology Workshop. I'm Barbara Frederick with the State Historic Preservation Office. Today's topic is protecting Civil War treasures at Gettysburg National Military Park. And with us is Stephen Brand. Stephen is a principal investigator and field director at Stantec. He has over 20 years of experience in cultural resources management. He completed his undergraduate work at the University of Pittsburgh and received his MA from Penn State. Stephen has been using metal detectors in archaeology for 10 years and has conducted archaeological investigations throughout the U.S., including sites related to the Civil War. In today's presentation, Stephen will discuss the archaeological monitoring conducted by Stantec during a recent rehabilitation project at Little Round Top at Gettysburg National Military Park. During this project, efforts were made to document and protect historic features and deposits, including preserving the 1890s Telford-type road base, a significant historic feature. Prior to ground disturbance, metal detecting recovered over 2,900 artifacts, including Civil War battle items, as well as commemorative era objects. So welcome, Stephen, and thank you for presenting today's program.
Thank you for having me.
So while you set up your presentation, I'm going to just remind the audience to submit any questions about today's topic in the Q&A feature, and then Stephen will answer them after the presentation is complete. So Stephen, when you're ready, please begin.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. I grew up near Gettysburg, going to school field trips, and anytime that relatives came to town, likely part of why I decided to become an archaeologist. So whenever we got the opportunity to work with the National Park Service at Gettysburg, I jumped at the opportunity. You can see on this map, the Little Round Top project area is approximately 3 miles south of the town of Gettysburg. It's a rocky spur north of Big Round Top. It was a significant part of the Battle of Gettysburg, made up of large boulders and outcrops that provided cover and fighting positions during the battle, but hindered organized formations. The goal of the rehabilitation project was to provide enhanced visitor access, as well as add interpretive signs, improve the drainage systems along the road, as well as update parking. On this map, you can see on the north is Wheatfield Road. Sykes Avenue goes down through the middle of Little Round Top. Warren Avenue is at the south, and Wright Avenue goes out to Route 15. Numerous items such as ammunition and artillery-related artifacts, gun tools, uniform items, and knapsack parts were found during the rehabilitation project. These artifacts reflect the intense fighting at Little Round Top during the battle. Many artifacts also relate to other significant periods of the Gettysburg National Military Park, including the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association from 1864 to 1895, and the Gettysburg National Park Commission period from 1895 to 1933. Let me show you a few of the things that we found. So by far the most common item we found were mini balls. These were carried by the soldiers, fired through their muskets. The top three on the figure are mini balls carried by federal troops. And the last one is a Gardner, which is typically associated with Confederate troops. In the middle are, this one's buck and ball, which would have been fired through a smoothbore musket carried by both sides, and a Sharps, which would have been carried by the U.S. sharpshooters. On the bottom is an Enfield, which would have been carried by both sides. It was an English weapon. And this is a Danson Park, which was fired. We found it near the summit, near the Governor Warren statue. They were manufactured in Texas and was likely carried by the Texas troops that were attempting to reach the summit on that part of Little Round Top. These are fired and dropped percussion caps, which would have been used to fire the weapons that the soldiers carried. This is a fired example, and these ones are unfired. These are artillery fragments and shrapnel balls. On the right side of the image are the fragments, and the shrapnel balls would have been packed inside the artillery shell. These are friction primers that would have been used to fire the cannons. They were inserted into the vent of the cannon, and when a lanyard was pulled, the primer would set off the charge and fire the cannon. We were hoping to find more of these so that we had a better idea of where the cannons were on Little Round Top. However, these were the only two that we found. These are federal plates. The top one is a belt plate, has little hooks on the back known as puppy paws that tell us that it was a belt buckle. And the bottom two are box plates, which were mounted on the soldiers' cartridge boxes. And this is one of my favorite artifacts that we found. It's a federal breastplate, would have been on the strap that carried the soldiers' cartridge box. And a lot of the soldiers discarded these because they didn't want to have a shiny brass target right in the middle of their chest. So these are some artifacts that we found that were not related to the battle, but are related to the park's use afterwards. These are bottles that were found along Sykes Avenue near the parking area at the summit that were discarded by visitors just over the edge. And the one on the right here is it says souvenir of Gettysburg, 1863. Was found near the Weichert, where the Weichert souvenir stand was shortly after the battle and before it became a national park. This is an interesting button that was found near Warren Avenue that's similar to the buttons that the soldiers had on their uniforms. However, it said Union News Company. The Union News Company sold newspapers, souvenirs, postcards, many places around the country, and they were in business from 1870 to 1969. The button may have been a souvenir, or it may have been from an employee of Union News Company. You can see here, this is one of the postcards of Little Round Top, sold by the Union News Company. If you've taken a tour of the battlefield or been to Little Round Top, you might recall the events that took place there. On July 2nd, Confederate First Corps troops were located to the southwest. This is Big Round Top and Little Round Top right here. You can see where Sykes Avenue goes through the Little Round Top. The Union Fifth Corps was situated along the summit, and the Confederate troops were attacking repeatedly. Eventually, reinforcements came for the federal troops, and they were able to repel all of the Confederate assaults, securing Little Round Top despite heavy casualties on both sides. Here's some of the specific rehabilitation tasks that happened during the project. You can see here that they were removing the asphalt sidewalks, trails through the area. They removed the invasive vegetation and replaced it with native plants, and they repaired social trails, and they restacked the stone breastworks that are located throughout the area. This is a picture of digging a trench to expand the parking area near the summit on Sykes Avenue. This is a trench that was dug to install the granite curbs along Sykes Avenue. And here's a trench that was dug to improve the stormwater runoff along the roads in the area. During the monitoring, we monitored all ground disturbing activities that took place during the project. They were metal detected prior to the task, and different metal detecting approaches were used depending on the planned activity. So in this figure, you can see the purple areas where transects were placed to investigate large areas that may have been of lower probability or it wasn't practical to detect the entire area. The green lines are the existing trails throughout the area. As I showed in that other picture, they were removing the asphalt, and we metal detected after they took the asphalt off, and then after they removed the sub base. The blue are the existing breastworks. They have been restacked multiple times since the battle. However, they were in pretty bad repair. The yellow areas are large areas where ground disturbing activities were going to take place. These were metal detected by two detectorists in multiple directions. And the red areas are areas where no ground disturbance took place, and therefore they weren't metal detected or monitored. This is an example of three examples of the trails. This is along the Vincent Spur, where Chamberlain Avenue was, the trail was redone using concrete. And the middle is a social trail that traveled to the Michigan Sharpshooters Monument. And this is the trail that goes to the 20th Main Monument after the asphalt had been removed and before the subbase was removed. These are trenches that were excavated for installation of the granite curbs. You can see this was after the asphalt of the road was removed, and this is after the subbase was removed. And this is the construction crew installing the granite curbs. You can see that they were about 8 feet long and installed on either side of the road. So this is an example of a large area where we metal detected. They were removing the vegetation around. This is the Fifth Corps Monument. A lot of people know it as the castle. And then this is after the rehabilitation project was done. And this is examples of restacking the breastworks. This is near the Michigan Monument. You can see Devil's Den in the background. They were quite overgrown with vegetation. This was after a lot of the vegetation was removed. And we metal detected on either side of the breastworks before they were restacked. And this is after the crew had taken the breastworks apart. They stacked the stone on either side, and we metal detected through the middle of the breastworks. And this is after it was finished. There's the Michigan Monument and Devil's Den in the background. We found almost 3,000 artifacts during the 1.5 year period of archaeological monitoring. This included over 1,500 ammunition-related artifacts, 437 artillery-related, as well as numerous artifacts related to the use of the battlefield as a military park. I collected location data for all metal detector hits that were found to be related to the battle or commemorative periods. And the location data can be used to inform us about the interpretation of the battlefield. You can see in this middle figure all of the points that were collected during the monitoring project. One of the ways that we can use this information was to confirm where regiments were located on the battle. Many of the regiments at Little Round Top during the battle carried similar small arms, making it difficult to connect dropped ammunition found during the rehabilitation project to specific units. However, it's known that some units had specific weapons, such as the Sharps rifles or smoothbore muskets. This allowed identification of regiments by matching their small arms with recovered ammunition, aided by monuments placed during construction of the park based on soldiers' memories. So an example, 69 caliber ammunition found around the 9th Pennsylvania Reserves Monument near Warren Avenue. The 9th Pennsylvania were equipped with 69 caliber rifled muskets, and 70% of the ammunition found in the area was 69 caliber mini balls, matching their issued weapons and confirming that the 9th Pennsylvania was positioned at this breastworks. Battery L of the 1st Ohio Light Artillery may have been positioned near where their monument is located on the northern end of Little Round Top. However, during metal detecting, the majority of the ammunition that was found was buck and ball ammunition, which would have been fired through 69 caliber smoothbore muskets. The only regiment that was located in this part of Little Round Top that carried smoothbore muskets was the 155th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. So it's likely that while the Battery L may have been there, these positions were probably manned by soldiers of the 155th Pennsylvania. Another example is along the summit, closer to the summit, where the actual 155th Pennsylvania monument is. 58 caliber mini balls, which were carried by the Union soldiers, were found in areas that provided natural cover, such as boulders or the quickly stacked breastworks. And here's an example along the actual summit. This is the 5th Corps monument, and this is where the boulders and breastworks provided cover, as well as a view of the Confederate positions at Devil's Den and along Houck's Ridge. So the events on the southeast end of Little Round Top, known as Vincent Spur, have been the topic of books such as Killer Angels and the popular movie Gettysburg. The information gained during the rehabilitation project brings new light to interpretations of the fighting that took place there. On July 2nd, the 20th Maine Infantry, led by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, defended Vincent Spur against Confederate 15th Alabama Regiment, commanded by Colonel William Oates. The extent to which the Confederates reached the top of the hill has been debated since shortly after the battle. Colonel Oates stated that his troops reached the top of the hill and a large rock, which became known as Oates Rock, which you can see in this picture. This map shows the ammunition that was found around the Vincent Spur. 23 Gardner bullets, which were carried by the Confederates, were found on the south and west slopes of the hill. And 80 dropped Federal ammunition, including mini balls and William Cleaners, were found on the summit, which indicates the concentration of the 20th Maine soldiers. 6 dropped Gardner bullets were found on the Vincent Spur, where the 20th Maine was, including 1 under Chamberlain Avenue, suggesting that the 15th Alabama did reach the top of the Vincent Spur, and 2 dropped Gardners and 36 dropped or fired percussion caps were found near Oates Rock, which support Colonel Oates' claim that his soldiers did reach this point. In addition to artifacts, monitoring uncovered several features related to the Telford-type road. From 1895 to 1905, avenues were built throughout the park using Telford-type construction. The Telford construction featured a foundation of large wedge-shaped cobblestones topped with smaller stones and a clay matrix covered with crushed limestone, providing a smooth, dust-free ride for horse-drawn carriages. The Telford-type road is an NRHP contributing resource of the park. Was one of the main things that we needed to identify during monitoring. This photo shows a drain that had been abandoned in place from the Telford-style road when Sykes Avenue was put in through the center of Little Round Top. And this drain was located up at this northern end. Here's another example of the remnants of the Telford Road. It's a drain that ran along Sykes Avenue, was covered up and uncovered during installation of the curbs. After it was uncovered, we recovered it with gravel and placed the curbs on top of it. We didn't disturb this section of the Telford Road. Another instance was a abandoned avenue marker, which was located also in the northern end of the area. This was a monument that had been removed when the road was abandoned, and the Park Service has this monument in their collections, and it's possible that it could be put back on this base. So although there have been varying ideas of how to use the park over time, it has been visited by veterans of the battle, tourists, school groups, relic hunters, and history buffs since the battle ended in 1863. Artifacts from the park's period of significance were still recovered during the rehabilitation project. The data recovered from the monitoring project adds to our understanding of the battle and how the battlefield has been used over time. Thank you for having me today. It's been my privilege to work on this project and to speak with you today.
Terrific, thank you. Go ahead and get your camera back on and we're going to get to some questions. There we go. And you can stop your screen share.
Okay. There we go.
Perfect. There you go. All right. So first question, is metal detecting a common procedure used at archaeological sites?
It is, especially in relation to battlefields. Um, it's one of the more productive methods that we use to identify locations of fighting during battles, particularly Civil War battles, but also Revolutionary War and French and Indian War battles.
So what materials can the metal detectors detect?
Anything that is ferrous. They can pick up the iron of the artillery shells or the brass of the buttons. Really, anything metal they can pick up.
At what depth do the metal detectors work? Is it a surface work or can it go deeper?
Uh, Much deeper. Many of them go like down 16 to 18 inches, from the ground surface to.
So the biggest question, we have multiple of these. So of the 3,000 artifacts recovered, what was the most unique item that was found or items? Was there anything that was completely unexpected?
Um, they were all very unique. The artillery shell that was on my last slide was one of the most exciting finds that we had. It was an unexploded fired shell, but also the items related to the park after the battle were very interesting. I thought it shows how people have used it since then. Um, and like I said, one of my favorite artifacts was that breastplate. Is just gave me goosebumps when I found it.
So is that something unique that's not usually found?
They're not. I mean, they're not super unique. They're typical on Civil War battlefields. Um, Everybody was issued them with their cartridge boxes.
Were there any recovered artifacts that could not be dated?
Nothing really comes to mind. Nothing that most, even like the bottles, you could date based on the base markings, and much of it was just related to the Civil War.
So there are two terms that the audience would like some clarification on. One is mini, when you referred to the ammunition, what did that mean? And the other is breastworks.
Okay, so the mini ball was a style of ammunition that was designed in France prior to the Civil War, became more standard usage. It just describes how the bullet is designed. There's rings on the bullet where grease could be held in the bullet, and also a cup on the bottom that would expand into the rifling of the barrel. It's basically just a method of manufacture. Um, and the breastworks were just the quickly built walls that the soldiers threw up as they were stationed along the Round Top and also throughout Gettysburg. But just they used, if there were existing farm walls, they would stack them higher, just places that they could gain more cover and concealment.
Any idea why they were named that?
That's just typically the name of such
Okay.
types of construction.
Okay. Did you use flotation to collect any objects?
We did not use flotation on this project.
Okay. And then were there any human remains that were found?
There were no human remains. That was a little surprising, but a lot of work was done right after the battle to collect and gather up the human remains.
Besides Stantec and the National Park Service, were there any other partners involved?
On this project, there was a construction contractor that did all the concrete and all the vegetation removal. But prior to this project, there had been phase one archaeological surveys done, as well as other metal detecting surveys done around Little Round Top. And the Park Service has archaeologists that also participated.
So you had a lot of hands out there looking.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Are there any future sites that are being considered for restoration there at Gettysburg?
That would be a question for the Park Service.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with their future plans.
So where can the artifacts that were found be viewed?
So in the visitor center at Gettysburg, I'm not sure if it's still there, but they had a temporary installation of the artifacts that were recovered, some of the artifacts that were recovered, and the vast majority of the collection was donated or included into their collections there.
The ammunition that was found, was that ammunition that had been used or was unfired?
Well, we found both. You can tell because a fired bullet looks like a piece of chewing gum. It's all mushed up and fragmentary. The ones that I showed pictures of were ones that have been dropped. So when a soldier reaches into their cartridge box, they might pull out one that they're planning to use, but they may drop another one. And that's how we typically can tell where fighting positions were, is by the dropped ones.
So speaking of that, how will you use the information that was acquired from the artifacts found during the rehabilitation project?
In the similar ways that I discussed during my presentation, we can tell where the units were based on the style of bullets, and also just where the fighting positions were, if it was a Gardner bullet or a mini ball.
So have you worked on other Civil War sites in Pennsylvania, and are there any that you would like to visit?
I have worked on other Civil War sites, not in Pennsylvania. I've worked on Manassas and further down in Southern Virginia. I enjoy visiting all of the Civil War battlefields. And anytime that I got an opportunity to work on one, I would take it.
That's always good. Another question about procedure. Did you use any other methods like deep penetrating radar during this project?
We did not, no.
Well, it seems that the procedures that you did do found quite a few artifacts with over 3,000 found. That's amazing.
We did. It was more than we expected.
So that's the questions we have time for today. So thank you to the audience for those. If you have further questions, you can contact Steve at Stantec via the email provided in the chat. So Steve, we have one final question for you. What would you like the audience to remember about today's presentation?
I think the main thing to remember is that we're very lucky to have Gettysburg as a resource. The generations before us thought to preserve it, and all the other national parks. The best way to support those parks is to please go visit and enjoy them.
Thank you so much. That was terrific. Thank you very much for today's presentation.
Thank you.